Thank you, Christine. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So, this year presented a multitude of opportunities for brands to take a stand on different social issues. But the question is, how do you do it right? Aside from wanting to learn how different brands and industries are perceived when they create different types of content for Instagram, some socially conscious, some promotional, we wanted to turn to behavioral data and see what it has to uncover about crisis messaging. Of course, many brands are doing the right thing nowadays and feel a moral responsibility to voice what they believe in and be a part of the solution, but many are still missing the mark on addressing all segments of their audience and truly understanding them. So we stepped into the shoes of our clients and found that some burning questions about how these attempts affect brand equity remained unanswered throughout the year. And that's why we decided to test how different types of messaging performs during a period of crisis. Today, we're honored to have Martin Albarda join the discussion. Martin is a published author and currently the senior lead at Flock Associates Limited. He spent over 25 years working with clients such as Coca-Cola, AP InBev, and dozens of others through his consultancy. Now he's here to discuss these findings and an integrated marketing strategy as we look into the future from the turbulent year that is 2020. Hello and welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Also joining us to present the results of the study is Bojana Stojanovic, Insights Manager at EyeSee, who is working on advertising projects. Hello, Bojana.
Hi, Sanya. Thanks for having me. Excited to share the results.
So this study was probably one of the biggest behavioral mobile studies conducted on 1,800 respondents. In a way, this was a very ambitious project since we had so many balls in the air. First up, 6 different industries: food and beverage, media, tech, beauty, healthcare, and hygiene. Then we had 6 types of content. And of course, we wanted to do all of that through a unique combination of implicit and explicit methods, which means we needed to have a very natural in-context evaluation for the implicit research, and then a standalone survey section for some explicit comments on the material. Bojana, can you tell us more about the study background?
Yeah, this was quite a feat. Another thing I have to mention here are the KPI that we tested, and there were a lot of them. At first, we split those KPIs into 2 groups, behavioral and survey KPIs, and they cover a plethora of variables that we examine both on the industry and post type levels. So before we deep dive into the findings, I just like to make a short stop here to explain the different post types and why we chose them. So we have Black Lives Matter and COVID-19 related posts that are examples of the most in the now posts connected with the huge societal issues and movements. So there are also support endorsement posts on corporate and social responsibility. And these posts showcase activities and campaigns that support various social groups such as LGBT people, veterans, socially vulnerable groups, etc. Then there are tactical posts, which is call to action content that invites viewers to participate in giveaway challenges or posts directly promoting new products or designs or campaigns or offers overall. Similarly, we have seasonal posts. Those are the special offers, such as discounts or limited edition items tied to those items, and those posts are tied to an event during the year. So this can be a specific holiday, such as Thanksgiving or Halloween, or a particular time of year when, for example, back to school season. And finally, there are what we call emotional posts, imbued with emotions, and those posts really aim to provoke the viewer's emotional reactions. They're usually accompanied by warm pictures or quotes, and also they are often sentimental.
Okay, thanks. So that clarifies it. So let's take a look into the study results. What would you say was one of the first things you noticed?
Yeah, well, many people think that positioning is the key for getting noticed. But in fact, your brand and content are the most important. So just think about creative ways to use your brand assets and ensure that your content is relatable and eye catching. So we saw that a key factor in ad retention is personal relevance. So, either by way of talking about relevant topics and showing they care for their customers, or through different offers and posts that directly concern the consumers in terms of the promoted product or service. Posts that do neither of those perform poorly and are just glanced through and not remembered. So, yeah, positioning is important and can push your visibility higher, but the creative elements are the ones that will determine whether the post will keep their attention. So, the study results clearly show that if the content is engaging and also attractive, results will not be significantly affected by the positioning in a feed. As people scroll through the feed, their focus dwindles, and the risk that your ad will not convey the message, even though your post is seen, grows higher. So, focus is another aspect of this. It is higher if the post is very engaging or if there is a lot of text to go through. So we need to be careful in interpreting these results and not just read out the numbers without understanding them. So if the viewers are not focused, they spend less time exploring the ad, and hence there is a less time for the message to come through. However, you're not at the mercy of positioning. Great content has the power to, let's say, trigger a reaction in a very short amount of time. It only takes around 2.8 seconds. So I'd say it's not always crucial that respondents spend a lot of time on your post. You can communicate well if you take care of the creative elements.
So, what are some of these creative elements that brands can vary between posts?
Well, there are a lot of unexpected things that consistently show up in a great performing ad. Things like showing the protagonist in a full body shot is more attention grabbing and engaging because it increases post visibility by around 5 to 10 percentage points. This creative element works for all industries except for the beauty, where close ups of the face are more attractive and relevant. Then, if there is a famous person in the image, it will increase the viewer's retention for around 7 percentage points compared to the shots of ordinary people or posts without any characters. But for sure, there is a caveat. Celebrities can sometimes poorly affect post clarity, likability, brand purchase, also, and even Instagram feed. The viewers are more focused on their faces rather than on the post purpose or main point or, let's say, message brand wanted to convey. Moreover, ads featuring female protagonists drive more positive emotions, and that increases by around 5 percentage points on average. Such ads are also evaluated as more attractive and transparent, and this stands for especially COVID 19 endorsement and seasonal type of ads in particular. And also, like I already mentioned before, including a call to action or a offer drives a higher focus and a better chance to keep viewers' attention for, let's say, longer than 5 seconds.
Okay, and we know that positive emotions drive engagement. So, what type of posts show this?
So overall, yes, engagement is made of emotions. So if you want to evoke emotions, don't be scared to push the envelope and to be creative. Some of the things that are connected with positive emotions are being sincere, honest, let's say show warm messaging, witty copies and images, also footage of animals, depictions of sport and activities. Yeah, but even more of all of this, talking about the relevant topics and clearly communicating that we, the brand, as a brand, stand against discrimination and racism, are contributing to the cause in this way. So showing a variety of races and cultural diversity is the key. So we see that posts that show two or more people who are not related, such as those are not family photos. These posts are seen as demonstrating unity in Black Lives Matter posts. Also, when Black Lives Matter posts are part of your content on Instagram, it is always better to show a variety of races than only African Americans. It's seen as a more transparent, more engaging, and also more attractive.
And how about negative emotions? What are some of the triggers there?
Okay, so yeah, on the other hand, what causes negative emotions is unclear messaging, especially copy that is unrelated to the image. Generic images also. This means that posts that do not represent the image post idea but are simply Instagramish, such as models, also smiling faces or fashion focused. Further, very long image descriptions and text heavy posts with a lot of hashtags. Um, so, on the more practical side, when an offer is unavailable or unattainable, let's say, and interestingly, giveaways with extremely big prices, such as expensive travels or gifts, we see that respondents find it harder to just believe that they will win. So, these posts seem less relevant to them. So, for example, during COVID, ads or giveaways for discounts or accessible rewards drive more, let's say, engagement than just a lavish presence.
So we covered emotional engagement that we did through facial coding and also eye tracking. But what about the stated KPIs? How did those show up?
Yeah, well, we have plenty of KPIs. So let's start with recall. So recall is pretty stable across all post types, but is slightly lower for support posts because people tend to get lost in all the information that is required to be there due to the nature of the post. Oftentimes, these posts introduce a collaboration, someone or something, an NGO or an advocate that is not usually a part of posts from this brand. So it just fails to be remembered. When it comes to likability, again, here, what is relevant for me is liked more. So, such as Black Lives Matter posts. Let's move on with clarity. So clarity is really interesting here. Some posts, like tactical offers or seasonal posts, are very upfront, and people get what they are about right away. Something with COVID-related posts, people are kind of united in this struggle with a common threat. So, as soon as the story is more complex, which we saw in some Black Lives Matter or supporting posts, people were unsure about the message. It was difficult for some respondents to connect with the post or with an action overall. So as soon as it is clarified with a message that clearly states what the brand is going to help, um, it just skyrockets in likability as well. When it comes to personal relevance, we already mentioned this, but I just want to point out one more time that more generic emotional posts are, even though they're aimed at creating a connection and also evoking positive emotions, are often seen as too stocky and not relatable to the viewers. Also, when it comes to brand usage, this is also interesting for us because Black Lives Matter shows great results here that can affect shopping as well, which again proves that this topic is something that will determine where some buyers spend their dollars. And also, another category that also stands out here are seasonal posts. since they are designed to respond to an acute seasonal consumer need, such as sunscreen in the summer. So they have a bigger effect on brand usage, like we see here.
Um, and how about the ad format? Did you find any differences between single images or carousel posts?
Okay, so yeah, when it comes to single images or carousel posts, we suggest using single images for higher message recall, even after a short glance. Carousel posts are usually less clear, and respondents just tend to spend more time observing them. Some were formats of, for example, supporting and also Black Lives Matter posts. In general, avoid carousels with a lot of text because these posts provoke low emotional engagement, lower potential to be shared. They're usually less clear and less informative. They're lost in so much text, and they're overall less appealing and enjoyable and less inspiring to brand purchase. Carousel works if it presents appealing images and sometimes in combination with socially relevant quotes and also celebrities. Those are the, let's say, creative elements that works for carousels.
And what about some interesting differences between industries? How does responding to the Black Lives Matter movement differ here?
Okay, so yeah, here we see one of the key insights from our study. Responding to the Black Lives Matter or COVID-19 crisis will improve brand perception, especially for industries with long-term relationships and also with loyalty building business models where those models are key, such as financial services and also strong FMCG brands. When it comes to the beauty industry, um, beauty industry stays close to their benchmark both in Black Lives Matter and COVID-19 crisis, but pharma industry performed poorly. These results are possibly caused by the fact that pharma companies have a specific audience that should be wisely targeted. When it comes to media, they also had, let's say, really poor results, possibly due to a lack of trust, because they stood out only in supporting posts. Or because the content like LGBT rights, those posts were relevant to their audiences. So I would once again say relevance is key for engagement. Always think about how the content is relevant to your customers, to your consumers, and not just to your brand. We also saw that brand purchase is driven more strongly if the respondents and the protagonists of the ad are of the same race. So this is also something to just keep in mind when it comes to creative elements.
Great, Brianna. Let's wrap up the study findings. I know it is very hard to do since it was quite a broad project covering so many facets of social media ads, but let's just take a moment to pick out the most important and actionable findings.
Thank you, Sanya. So, the biggest takeaway here is that Black Lives Matter and COVID-19 posts can be more impactful than emotional posts and supporting posts. So, think about meaningful ways to address the crisis in a less generic way, more humble, more human, and also uh, let's make it more relatable to your audience. Emotional images can often be less personally relevant due to the use of generic photos, also motivational quotes, etc. On the other hand, seasonal and tactical posts perform the worst in terms of emotions. They're less innovative and the type of brand content that is most commonly encountered on social media. But when it comes to tactical and seasonal offers, these type of posts are, let's say, the easiest to understand, and tactical offers have a long retention power, such as posts explaining the rules of a giveaway or, for example, a course of action that needs to take place.
So, thanks, Brianna. This was quite a lot to take in, and we covered a lot of ground. We see so much exciting insight and tactical bits of advice here. But what happens next? Martin, how do you think companies should use research like this to make data-driven decisions?
It's a really good question because, as you said, it is a lot to take in, and luckily it was a lot of good stuff to take in. So we're certainly happy about that. But yeah, the question often is, so now what, right? And I think that is the question that you need to ask yourself as a marketer with any kind of insight or research that you unearth, is to sort of figure out, okay, so what can I do with this? And I think that's something that I also find in my past life, but also in my current life, is usually something that is almost more difficult than the research itself, right? Is how do I find a way to use this usefully? And I think ultimately what you should do as a company is to say, okay, so what does this tell me about some of my core objectives and my core business goals that I have, right? For me, marketing is a subset of business goals. So if you have your business goals, then you have your marketing goals, then you have your communication goals, then you have media goals, etc., right? So that's sort of how it ladders up. And so if you want to find out what does this mean, how does this help me, is to sort of go back to, well, what big questions, what big issues am I trying to address as a marketer? And what does this tell me? Either to confirm that those are the right issues, or to contradict that it's actually different, or give me new insight in terms of how I relate to the target audience and how they think and feel about my brand, or how about the business that they're in, etc. So I think that is what you need to go back to. So relate back what you have learned here to what you're trying to do, what you're trying to get to move in your business and in your marketing objectives, and then align those research findings for basically bettering yourself in that quest.
Yeah, thank you. But it's also interesting to think about these results that we just heard are in line with our recent work for Twitter. We did a study on non-traditional gender roles in sports ads. Mm-hmm. So we found that consumers love brands participating in conversations on culture. Now we see the same thing confirmed on Instagram. So the overarching theme here is one of relevance. So be it talking about what matters to me or showing the products that I need in the moment. So there's a nice socially conscious side to it and a very practical one. So I wonder, how can companies achieve staying consistent with the brand and being a part of all the conversations that are relevant to the consumer, especially when they're not at all related to their core business? So on the one hand, it makes sense for companies to voice what they believe in, but it misses the point if it is done just for the sake of saying it and as virtue signaling. So does every brand need to be a part of every conversation of the moment?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and the short answer is no, right? For me, the more relevant question is, should you be part of that conversation or not, right? I think what we've seen over the last 6 to 8 months with COVID sort of taking over the world, literally and figuratively and economically, is that certainly in the beginning, it seemed like every brand and their mother was sort of saying, we understand these are difficult times, but here's how our cookies or how our car or how our hand lotion is the best solution under these current difficult circumstances. And it just doesn't make sense, right? It is. If you have to sort of pull it in like that, consumers are very smart and very educated, and they'll sort of pull through that very quickly, and they think that that's just not relevant to me. And in fact, I believe it can become counterproductive, because you can get the ridicule of consumers, and you become a hashtag or something like that. I remember a couple of years ago, Pepsi had the Kardashians, and it also had something to do with sort of a related Black Lives Matter type of moment, and it was completely tone deaf. It was completely the wrong message, and they had to pull the ad very quickly when there was huge backlash against it. So I think what we've learned here from the research is that if you can find that natural, logical place that you make sense in that moment, and you can relate to that moment, and the consumer can relate to why you are in that moment, then it makes perfect sense to do it. And it can actually enrich and enhance the communication, because it can, just similar to your findings around sport, it can actually make you more relevant, and it can make you stand out from the competition. But if the opposite is true, when it sort of feels dragged into it and not relevant and kind of as you called it, virtue signaling, consumers don't buy that, right? Literally, but also figuratively. They're not going to buy into that. They think that they know when they're being kind of, taken for granted or taken into a direction that doesn't make sense. And best case scenario, they'll make fun of you for 15 seconds on Twitter. The worst case scenario is really backlashes. You have to pull ads and do all sorts of other things. So be very careful with it, is how I would say, and find the natural interaction with it. If it's there, great.
Yeah, it's kind of I'm sure that consumers can see right through it, and it's kind of, pushing
Right.
companies to be more and more creative, to find new ways of saying the same thing, basically, like everyone, when COVID broke out, was saying, but like the brands that managed to find a fresh way that makes sense along with their brand, I think those were the clear winners.
Absolutely.
And another thing we encounter is companies who are kind of sitting on a gold mine of data and yet still do not have a good understanding of the consumer. So in your book, Zero Paid Media as the New Advertising Model, you mention a law you came up with. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, it was half jokey, but based on truth, right? I work with a lot of CMOs, a lot of Fortune 500 companies, and what I work on is what I call the how of marketing, right? How do you orchestrate? How do you structure? How do you build process, ways of working, build out ecosystems that support all of that, etc. And as we got asked a lot of the time, we got asked a question like, I've got all this data and I've got all this stuff that I know now that I never knew before. And at the same time, I'm more confused than ever about what I should do. Right? It also goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, so how do you use this kind of stuff, right? So the law that I came up with is that with every increase in data, your insight and understanding of what it all means decreases by the same amount. And that's sort of the law. And I think, even though we've made great strides in terms of marketing tech that can help you with mining the data and building understanding out of the data, I still think a lot of marketers are confused, right? And they latch onto something that they think, oh, now I've got a data point and I'll just work with that one. I think it is a real challenge. The way out of it is to really, and I go back to what I said earlier, is to be really purposeful and mindful about what is it that I'm trying to accomplish with my activities, right? So if I'm very clear and articulate about this is the business objective I'm trying to support with this marketing objective, and that marketing objective translates to this communication objective, then track against those things. Make sure that your data can give you insight as to how you're doing against those insights. And whether you then have a bazillion clicks or 5 clicks, if that is a metric that really doesn't matter, you might have that data, but it doesn't matter that to look at that data. So that's what I think is the most important thing, is to sort of not drown in the data, is to be purposeful about what is it that I need to know, what is it there for, what is it that I need to know about what I'm doing, and therefore be very clear about what is this investment in marketing that I'm doing supposed to deliver. Let's track and measure against that and build my data around that. And all the other data could be interesting, could be nice to know, but it's not going to be that relevant. So the other analogy, and it's not mine, but I heard this once and I thought it was very clever, is a pilot has a lot of dials and gauges and switches and whatever in front of them, right? But really they only need 4 or 5 things to fly the plane, right? They need to make sure that the plane flies in a straight line and doesn't sort of go down or up too much. They need to make sure it goes from point A where they depart to point B where they're supposed to go. They need to make sure they have the right speed and those kinds of things. So it's 4 or 5 gauges that give them the most important information to make sure that the plane is flying. All the other information is really important when something goes wrong or when you need to make a change. But those 5 dials are the most important dials just to pay attention to, and that's what you need to do here as well.
Yeah, totally agree. It's when I think of the research that we do, it's kind of like a 3-layered cake in a way.
Right.
There's like the subconscious and implicit things in the data that is not available to you if you just ask people how they like a product or an ad or something. And then on top of that, there's this explicit survey data. But on the third layer is the kind of human touch and fitting it all into a context, because all of this is completely irrelevant if you don't have the experienced researchers who can tell you how that, how that piece of the puzzle fits into your goals, like you just mentioned, and what you're
Right.
trying to achieve. So you also mentioned the how of marketing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about different channels. So we also do a lot of omni-channel research, as we see there's a need for comprehensive understanding of all the touch points on the path to purchase, but also while set in the appropriate context. So to me, it seems that social media is the context in which brand content is kind of level with content from other real people we interact with. It's a stream of advertising and non-advertising content. It's perhaps forcing brands to employ a more human tone in communication. So how do you think social media specifically influences overall brand perception compared to TV advertising or other marketing channels? And how can brands organize all their marketing efforts?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something that we're only beginning to learn because on the one hand, right, I think Facebook is now 20 years old or something like that, or maybe 15. I can't remember what the exact number is, but it's still, it's still relatively young, and it's certainly evolving a lot as well. And so we're only beginning to learn how these interactions work. I'm working with one of my clients here in the United States who have very recently launched a campaign that is 100% in social media, and they try to, and were ultimately successful in creating kind of like a social media movement where they kicked it off with a couple of influencer celebrities who did a certain challenge online with a hashtag for that challenge, and then invited others to sort of try and do a similar kind of challenge. And what is really interesting is that first of all, because they built it very smartly with the agency, it really took off. But secondly, we're beginning to see that it was really influencing how people perceive the brand and how they sort of engage and interact with the brand. And so I think, and that's really for me kind of the first time that it really is beginning to come together in a different way than in the past, when social media marketing was more sort of, call it, action oriented, right? And this is really more sort of brand building oriented. And I think we're only at the very beginning of understanding that. And I think one of the things that you said is really the key to it is, so how do you sort of combine this stream of paid advertising content and non-advertising or user-generated content? And how do you, importantly, as you say, how do you strike the right tone so that it all can become one? And I think, like I said, research like the one that you're doing here is for the first time allowing us to understand, well, how do consumers react and interact and respond to that? And so I think, given my experience with that one advertiser, which is, again, that's literally playing out now, and kind of research as you're doing, is that we're now for the first time beginning to understand a little bit about, sure, it can drive engagement or clicks or whatever, but it can actually also help you build a brand and help not just brand awareness, but brand engagement and brand understanding and sort of the typical things that you would have expected from TV in the past can now also be accomplished in this medium.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really a pleasure talking to you, and stay safe and all the best to you in your work.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it very much. Good luck with this, and I think the research is fascinating.
Thank you so much. And I would like to thank everyone who joined us today and tuned into our session. Thank you all for being here. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them through the chat box or email us. If you have any ideas or suggestions that you would like to see us cover in some future research, especially on socially relevant topics, and how can we use behavioral research to understand these topics better, also feel free to drop us a note. We're really looking forward to hearing from everyone. Thanks everyone, and stay safe.